What we've done now is we talked about this generation and its impact on politics, but what we didn't really talk about is how do you really reach them, except for just kind of talking a little bit about some of the ways to reach out. And so what we've got here is Heather Smith, who's the executive director of Young Voter Strategies, and these folks have really been looking hard at all the most effective ways to reach these folks in campaigns for both parties in the last 2 cycles, and she's going to come to talk a little bit about that. Heather?
So thank you, Peter and Simon and Rui. Wonderful information and a really well-articulated vision of the impact on politics that young people can have, and I think are already having if you take a really close look at it. Not only is there a new generation emerging, but in the 2004 and the 2006 elections, we saw a new generation emerging at the polls. There was the significant increase in turnout, 4.3 million more young voters voting in the last presidential election, 2 million more young people voting in the last midterm election. And this can have a serious impact on who's the party in power today, but also the party in power for decades to come. Not only are they voting, but one thing I will add to the information is that voting is a habit. So with all these new voters entering the electorate, not only do they vote, but they will continue voting in all likelihood. So the question becomes, why this increase in turnout and how do we further it? Young Voter Strategies is a project at the Graduate School of Political Management at the George Washington University with support from the Pew Charitable Trust. And we've been looking at this question ever since the increase in 2004, the really dramatic increase in turnout that we saw. And we've found 2 consistent things that are happening. One, it's the personality of the millennials. It's an engaged generation. They're active. They're paying attention. They're following politics. They're watching the news. They're volunteering in record numbers. And they're quite susceptible when someone talks to them about taking action in a political arena. And the second thing we found is that if you ask them, they will in fact vote. So we have spent the past couple years then figuring out how do you most effectively ask them. We've done polling about what issues motivate them, what gets somebody angry, what makes somebody show up at the polls, what are those issues. We've looked at randomized field tests, looking at which voter contact and what type of contact will most effectively mobilize somebody, and what kind of increase can you find from those tactics and strategies. And third, we've looked at campaigns. What campaigns have most effectively targeted and mobilized young people, and what have they done? Overwhelmingly, we found a couple things, and I'll just walk through some of the tips, and then we just released a case study and booklet which we'll have available at the end, which will go into much more detail, but I'll give you the quick summary. First, you have to build a list. Young people move around a lot. They're very mobile. They're moving every year. If they're in college, they're moving around city to city. It's a very mobile generation, so you have to build a very good list so that you can find them and ask them to vote. A couple ways to do that is to do voter registration. Register them to vote consistently, and then you'll have your own list. And 81.6% of registered 18 to 29-year-olds in the 2004 elections cast a ballot. So once you got them on the list and got them registered, very likely to turn out and vote. Second, you can buy lists. So a lot of the nonpartisan groups like Rock the Vote have millions and millions of young people on a list that they've registered with their current and updated information that they then broker to campaigns and parties and organizations. So you can buy those lists right after the registration deadlines and supplement your existing list. And then third, there's things like online voter registration tools and programs like Facebook, which we'll hear more about later, where young people are literally putting their information up there and telling you where they live, what their political persuasion is, how to find them, what their phone numbers are, etc. So really mine those sources that are out there, build a good list so that you can then go out and contact youth. Second, you need to communicate with them. You need to talk to young people where they are, and you need to talk about issues in a way that's relevant to their own lives. So you don't have to change what issues you talk about. It's still healthcare, it's the war in Iraq, it's jobs in the economy, it's the environment, it's energy prices. It's no different, but you have to talk about it in a way that's relevant. When you're out there talking about healthcare, it's not prescription drug plans for their grandparents. It's the fact that 18 to 29-year-olds are the most uninsured age group in our country. If you start talking about that, politics becomes relevant. Communicate about issues that matter in a way that matters. And then second, communicate using mediums that they use. So You don't need to host big parties and have a few people can do that with their star power, but just go to where they are. Go to campuses, work with the young Democrats, the college Democrats, have them bring people together. Go into the communities. They're volunteering in record numbers we saw. Go to those service events and talk to them. Go to places they are. And finally, they're online. So go online, set up your Facebook page, get a young intern to show you how to use it, figure it out. But they are congregating online and they're using those tools. So go where they are and communicate with them. And then third and finally, and ultimately most importantly, just ask them to vote. Treat them like voters, not volunteers, and they will in fact turn out. We've done a series of randomized field experiments. We call them prescription drug trials for democracy, where it's literally put a group of people over here that don't get any contact and another group over here that does, and compare the two at the end of the day. And you isolate everything except for that one treatment. And what we've found is that a knock on the door from a peer, in person, knock on the door, is an 8 to 10 point increase in turnout amongst this generation. A live phone call where a friend calls a friend and says, hey, it's election day, go vote. 3 to 5 point increase in turnout amongst voters who wouldn't have otherwise cast a ballot. It's an amazing amount of increase. That's enough to actually make or break an election in a tight race. The chattier, the better. The more personal, the better. And things like direct mail and robocalls alone don't have a really big impact. It's more of that live, in-person, peer-to-peer contact that does. And then finally, if you ask them, they will turn out, they will vote. And I really and truly believe that we saw an impact from the campaigns that did this in the last election. You saw folks like Joe Courtney in the 2nd District in Connecticut win his race by 83 votes. The youth turnout increased over 700% in the campus districts. That was a few more than the 83 votes that he needed. You saw that happen in Montana with John Tester, with Jim Webb in Virginia. And these campaigns just treated them like voters. They built their list. They talked about politics in a way that was relevant. They went to places where young people are gathering, and then they picked up the phone and asked them for their vote. On average, it's about $10 of a new voter, and the turnout speaks for itself. So if campaigns continue doing this in the short term, they can in fact win close elections. You do this for the next couple elections, especially if you're the Democratic Party, you've gotten them for 2 major elections in a row. The third one is the charm, as Pete was saying. At least that's what history shows. And it's a way to build power and a progressive base for decades to come. So thank you.